Shell.
Got
Okay.
it.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone in person and online and who might watch this in the future to Off the Horn, a series that the NASA's Committee for Gender Equity is putting on in an effort to allow people to gain skills off their horn that they can apply in their professional musical lives. And this time we have Shelly Tanabe from Wind Player Services, an excellent repair tech that was highly recommended to be the person to talk to on this subject. What we're interested in covering today is not so much how to DIY your own horn repairs, but the relationship between a repair tech and a client, and the ways to get the best out of that relationship, as well as the career path of becoming a repair tech. So I wanted to start with the most basic, Shelly, why is it important to establish an ongoing relationship with a repair person? Um, what's the benefit of this back and forth?
Okay. You really want to look at your relationship with your repair tech as an ongoing relationship that you maintain so that the repairs that you get are your repairs. If you drop your horn off, even at a fantastic shop without any kind of communication to the repair technician, they will give you the best repair that they can, but it will have no personal element to it. They'll be using as guidelines things like factory setups, their own personal beliefs developed over their years of practicing their craft, but you miss out on the personal element. And the repair shop is so much more than repair. This is kind of where everything comes together and lands. When you buy your instrument, you're buying your instrument. When you buy your mouthpiece, you're buying your mouthpiece. But those two companies and sets of design have not met before. And then, of course, the musician, you yourself, are just such a huge part of the process. So, an ongoing relationship, even if you can't meet your repair tech in person, detailed communication puts the whole picture together so that the technician is not just working on a saxophone, they're working on Allison's saxophone for Allison and Amelia, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's really cool. I I think I can relate to that idea of needing to specify maybe my values and what I want out of, it's not just, oh, I feel like I have a leak in the bottom end, but like I need it to be so responsive that the kind of music that I play might necessitate that I come in from a niente on a low B. That's how, like that's how sensitive I need this horn to work.
Yes.
And sometimes I know I have worked with repair people in the past who I probably didn't tell them that level of or that kind of specificity, and they played the instrument and it worked, after they did their work, but it wasn't maybe the kind of work that I, the exactitude or something that I was looking for.
I mean, you're kind of hinting at just a degree of, oh, it's kind of a dirty word to us, standards. But, how sensitive, how far do you go? Money is very real. What is this person looking for? What are their boundaries? And we all know that the low B is the worst note on the saxophone. And it requires the most player responsibility. I can give you everything perfect to the degree of perfect that I've ever been capable of. But if you're not trained to execute a low B, the horn is counting on that.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about just how specific you want and need and are willing to be paying for. That's part of the deal. But for something that sensitive, we also need to look at your mouthpiece. Not every mouthpiece is compatible with every saxophone. So when I never communicate with the player, just doing the best repair I can always leaves me wondering, but will this be successful once it's back in my client's hands?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so then when a person comes to go pick up the instrument, what then? When you've said you've done the work, what's the crucial step then?
Play testing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I tend to just kind of give the rundown if there's any discussion, or if I have any questions or things that I just want to check in with them on after I went through the horn with them. But I have to be very careful because I'm a talker and I don't want to plant any ideas or suggestions in my client's mind. What's all this?
I don't know. Zoom has a mind of its own. Maybe that's Zoom's way of endorsing the message you just gave.
Okay, I'm glad they approve.
Yeah.
But the first thing I like to do is just leave the client for a moment with the instrument and say, just warm up. I'm interested in your initial gut reaction. Because many times there are things that are on the saxophonist's mind that don't get put on their list. You could have just forgotten, or things that you just don't even think about, certain sensitivities, hot spots. So at the pickup time, I first want to know that initial reaction. And then I know what I want to ask about. And for every woodwind that I work on, I have a play test that I ask everyone to do that just covers the typical routine mechanism, just to make sure everything is where it should be.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And I'll just encourage anyone, Melvin, Sarah, Amelia, Amanda, add to ask any follow-up questions that you might have.
Yeah. Oh, by all means.
Okay, cool. So let's see. How, right. I think that's, I mean, would you say sometimes you all pick up your instruments from the repair shop and just immediately bring them home without the play test moment? Yeah. Yep. But I think it's a gentle insistence that you should take the time in the shop to play.
What would you do with the mouthpiece if they brought it to you? Like, would you touch it, or would it be more like oh, this doesn't interact well? Like,
Well, the biggest thing that we are still trying to understand, and it's kind of a personal mission of mine, I know that mouthpiece incompatibility is very real, but we don't have a systematic way that just says this mouthpiece goes with this. It's all learned in a very anecdotal way. And I also have a deep respect for people who are mouthpiece people, mouthpiece makers, mouthpiece refacers. That's an art form all unto itself. They're not doing my job, and I will never try to do theirs. All I really want to know about mouthpieces is how to look at them and inspect them and get a clue if the mouthpiece might be contributing to a problem that maybe we're still not solving through a traditional, a normal repair technique sort of thing. We just always have to be aware that the mouthpiece can actually be the root of the problem, or any kind of accessory added into the mix. I like to look at a complete repair experience as kind of like a stool with 3 legs. There's 3 main components. I have to do my job. The instrument itself has to be a quality, reputable, solid design. Many times an instrument just isn't of a quality that there are saxophones sold that actually do not function. And no repair can overcome that. So we need a good design. I have to do my job. And then the player comes in with their own abilities, as well as their choices of all the accessories. So that's where I say the repair shop is really where all of this comes together, and we have the opportunity to do a complete problem-solving experience.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a heartbreaking topic when the instrument is literally of such a low quality that you might have to deliver some bad news on that first visit.
It does happen, and I always feel terrible, and you want to do what you can, but expectations that aren't reasonable are unfortunately a common stumbling block if something goes sideways between a technician and a client.
Yeah. That's got to be all part of building a relationship. I imagine if you were to accept, if a repair person was to accept in a pretty low quality instrument and kind of do their once over on it, hand it back, and the player is unsatisfied, it's sort of a breakdown of that relationship too. So that frankness is probably so beneficial up front.
It really is. And shops have handled that differently. when those instruments first started coming into the marketplace. I want to say that was maybe 20, 25 years ago. And many shops just had a list of instruments that they refused to even work on and accept. And that was fair from the standpoint of what you just said. If you can exert quality service onto something that isn't capable of holding it or functioning at all, I understand the business just saying we're not going to go there. But then the flip side of the coin showed itself and just said, well, we're service people, we're here to help. Is there some sort of middle ground? Explain what the instrument is, what its limitations are, do a little bit of work to try and buy that client some time so that they can give the time to finding a quality instrument. Different businesses have handled that differently, but none of which make for a good day in the shop.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh man. How about like a custom work,
Sure.
add-ons and things? What kind of experience do you have with that? And what's common? What are people doing these days to their instruments, and what's that process like?
The most common thing for saxophone that I'm doing in the shop are key risers, custom key risers. People that have very large hands, they just find that the gaps of the palm keys between their hand and the palm keys is too large, or the side keys, side B flat C, high E. So palm key risers are the most common thing that is happening. But custom work has really run the gamut in terms of actually cutting keys and rebuilding them. People who have physical disabilities have had some very specific needs. That actually shows up more for the clarinet players, where the fingertips are required to cover open holes. So the saxophone custom work, I can't even discuss it without giving credit to a Nebraska tech, David Nab. Pardon me, David Nab was the first recipient of the work of Jeff Stelling. Are you familiar with that situation?
I am intimately familiar. I was studying with David Nab in high school when he suffered his stroke. And then and my older sister also studied with him. He's been a dear family friend for like half my life. So I also know Jeff Stelling a little bit too in this whole process. But I'll let you tell the story. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, well, you can please fill in the details if I have them wrong, but David Nab actually lost the use of one of his hands. And so the entire saxophone had to be rebuilt to be powered by one hand. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It was just known to technicians as the left-handed saxophone, I believe. And the engineering that went into that is some of the finest work done outside of a factory setting that I've ever seen. And so whenever I think of saxophone custom work, that's the job that always comes to mind. And in my technician circles, there's another comparable tech who was up in Wisconsin named Brian Russell. And he did the second one of those that was ever done. And that was actually for a client of mine. Oh, wow. So yeah, a client of mine, same thing, suffered a stroke and lost mobility on one side of the body. And Jeff kind of said, this is a once in a lifetime job, which I completely understand. The high custom work like that, those jobs are more jobs of passion than of profit.
Right.
Not that anyone would really be looking for profit to help in these situations, but the other part of that is, for a very busy shop, when you have work that takes so much time, you have to pay attention to who is being forced to wait for you while you're doing custom work. So that's a very delicate balance. But Brian Russell did the second one-handed saxophone, and that brought in things to us like the use of carbon fiber rods, and it was just very high level engineering. But I digress on that. But the saxophone custom work most commonly are key work adaptations, changing the height and the placement to accommodate a player's hands. And we have a lot of options there. You just have to decide how far you're going to go. Can the factory help? and what's the most productive way to solve the issue at hand. Pardon the pun.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's super interesting. I know, like, I've gotten a few custom things done, like reinforcing the neck on my tenor and shifting the support piece on the berry neck to actually be where the crux of the curve is. You know, like I think it was sort of.
Are you talking about underslung neck supports?
Yes. Oh, it's literally.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we just moved it basically.
Okay.
Yeah, it was sort of like not where it would be most beneficial anyway. So, but I potentially anyway. So those are little things I've done. Have you all done anything custom to your instruments?
Mine's ergonomically very nice.
Nice.
So I so far like it's, but maybe in the future, depending on like the repertoire that I choose to play, I might change it just for like efficiency's sake.
Yeah.
I've added like rubber key risers because one of the palm key, I have small hands and one of the palm keys is very out, so then I can't reach the other ones.
Right.
But nothing permanent.
Yeah. Those rubber ones are maddening. Do you have any hints on how to keep them from falling off?
No, because every adhesive that has ever been tried has failed. Some of it's just a matter of how long before they fail, but they do like to slide off. But you know, you hit on two things come to mind from what you guys have experienced. The adaptability, and anytime you do custom work to make a horn match one player, you have to ask the question, should this be reversible or not?
Oh.
And yeah, so that's always a valid question to keep in mind. If I do a poured resin riser that then can be sanded and shaped to fit the hand once it's all set up. So the flexibility of that as the player might grow or change position, and those can be taken off without damaging lacquer. So you have to think about, is this temporary? Are we really settled on what we want? And could a future player remove this, or will it do damage? It's just a question. There's no right answer.
Yeah.
But the neck the under supports to necks, there's no right or wrong, but I am scared of them because of the acoustic implications. And so if you are supporting something like that structurally, then that's certainly the benefit to kind of slowing down or hopefully completely prohibiting the neck being pulled down and ovaled. But sound, now I'm only qualified to talk about acoustics on the kindergarten level, but sound is resonant energy, and your instrument is the vessel to generate, sustain, and produce this energy, keep it going. And when you put weight along the path of the resonating instrument, something's going to change. Now, we hope that anything that changes is nothing but beneficial to you. But when you do things like that, you do have to just remember that we're adding weight very early in the system. Every note you play, that additional weight will be impacting what your results are. And so I just really advise people to be very cautious about that and make sure that when you do this, and anything you solder on can be unsoldered. So there's, no one needs to have a heart attack by me saying this, but we have to remember that when we add accessories or modifications, that it is changing the way the instrument is physically resonating, and be aware of that. When you add weight, sometimes it puts more player responsibility for the energy required to start the sound initially.
Okay.
Now, for a young developing player, that may be too much of a burden. But for a very well-developed player, they may actually love that, because resistance is not a dirty word. Resistance is what gives the player control over the instrument. Yeah. So just the awareness of what is a possibility to change when you're focused on a singular benefit.
Yeah, good points. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. How about, let's get into the things that we do that is potentially, the things that players do that are potentially detrimental that we aren't even aware of. What are the common pitfalls that we do that cause damage that we're not even aware we're doing?
Well, saxophone is a very kind instrument to you guys in that regard. If we were talking about wood instruments, then we could take an entire hour just to talk about that. But saxophones are actually quite durable. A brass body, it may be silver or gold plated or have a custom finish on it, but saxophones are constructed of yellow brass, and that's a very durable material. Our pad leathers are also very durable. The adhesives behind them are very strong. So with good handling, the saxophone is actually quite receptive to the life we put it through. But it's lunchtime. I don't want to be gross, but those people that don't take their reeds off, oh, holy moly.
Yeah.
You induce my gag reflex, it's a $50 surcharge. No. But that I experienced in my years in New York City in the gigging jazz community, they played a lot of synthetic reeds and they would have multiple horns set up. I saw this from my Broadway crowd as well. When you're doubling and have multiple instruments out, many times with the synthetic reeds, they just put a cap on and put that unit away. Okay. It's disgusting, but dirt and gunk and funk as it builds up is a dimensional change. And so resistance, tuning, voicing, it's all gradually changing when you're not keeping all of that clean. Yeah. So I'm just can't say enough. Please take your reeds off when you're done.
Like literally like the bore, like the size and the shape are changing when enough gunky crap builds up. That's gross.
Yes. One of the worst days in the shop when I was in New York City was one of the professional players. He played a silver plated tenor and they were going to do a big photo shoot. And so he dropped the horn off and he said, "Money is of no object. This horn needs to be beautiful. Whatever you have to do to make it photograph beautifully, I need you to do it." Okay. So his neck got cleaned. And this was he played for Billy Joel. And so those guys were always, they never put their horns away themselves. They had to escape the stage while the crowd is still clapping, hoping there's a second or third encore. That's when the musicians are getting away. So to keep things simple, the stage hands would just lift the necks off, everything else attached, and put things in. So I cleaned his neck and I cleaned the mouthpiece. And when he came back in to play test, I could tell something was very, very wrong. He could no longer slot his altissimo.
Wowza.
Yes. So that was a huge lesson of just, it's funny and it's humorous to talk about the lunchroom remnants and saxophones, but it actually changes the dimension of the bore of the instrument. And altissimo is not a direct mechanical function. We facilitate the overblowing of the harmonic series. So all of that stuff, it's just like he lost his traction. Wow. And he was very unhappy, left the room and just played on his own for about 15 minutes. And I could hear it was coming back. But I'm just glad the EMTs didn't have to haul me out of there that day. That was very scary.
Yeah.
So the general cleanliness, I mean, overall, just takes care of extending your pad life, preserving your board dimensions for the acoustic side of things. If you have a silver-plated instrument or component, direct sunlight accelerates tarnish.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for those folks with silver on their horns, life on a stand, even for just the everyday stuff, keep the instrument out of direct sunlight. And keeping neck tenons clean. As grit and dental plaque build up there, the neck connections can get hard, which puts more stress on them, makes them more likely to pull down.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. How about like laying the instruments down, which side up and on for which instruments and that sort of thing?
Put them in a position that no key work is bearing the weight of the horn is the best thing I can advise. And then taking into account, if you're laying them down when they have a lot of water going on, you'll want to be thinking about how the water is tracking and kind of letting gravity do its thing to naturally route the water downwards through the horn in the same way that it would go in playing position.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good one.
Can I add one thing to this?
Please.
Yeah. I was thinking about you saying that things we do that we might not realize are detrimental. If you go to some of the workshops and camps and things, I know one activity that's very common is we're going to take apart our own instruments and put them back together.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of benefit to doing that. You see and feel and handle all the elements of the mechanism, but sometimes then people will run with that and want to repeatedly take the instrument apart monthly. And the metal of the posts that all of your screws screw into, that yellow brass is not very hard. And it's not designed to have the screws going in and out on, I feel safe saying that the instruments are designed to be fully disassembled and tolerated up to 2 to 3 times a year. But for someone that might want to really run and feel like they're doing a benefit to their horn, taking it apart and putting it back together, I've seen kids do it up to weekly. It's just, yeah, it's excessive, but it's worth mentioning that that's just too hard on the threads that support the mechanism of the horn.
Okay, cool. I've never done it myself, but I was also wondering, like, the springs, does that tension wear out, or like what's the right word for it? Can you not, maybe you can put it back where it belongs, but that tension is also changed, or am I wrong about that?
It's possible. Springs have gone through quite an evolution in the last decade. We've had trouble getting really good spring wire. The suppliers have really struggled on our behalf, but springs can inherently be too brittle so that they can snap. They can be too mushy so that the flex of detaching and recradling them reduces tension. That shouldn't happen if you don't distinctly push on a spring, but it's possible. So those are the things I worry about when people are taking their own horns apart. I worry about the springs cradling properly without undue pressure on them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a valid concern.
Yeah. No. Moving on then, if no one has any other questions about that, I'm interested in your career path and how you ended up where you are. Can you tell us about your musical journey and that process?
Well, I started as a saxophonist, and I remember being 12 years old and realizing that I was good at it. And that was very powerful. It was like, okay, I found my thing. I can't hit a ball to save my life, so athletics was out of the question. And I just went whole hog on being a saxophonist. I was studying with the professor at the University of Iowa as a high schooler. This was pre-Kenneth Che. And all I wanted was to get onto the campus. So I got out of a 4-year high school in 3 years just to get to college. It was complete tunnel vision about being a saxophonist. But in the area was the one professional technician. His name is Denny Lawson. And Denny could not handle everything that was coming at him. So he didn't work for students. You had to at least be an undergrad before Denny would work for you. And my professor kept advocating for me, but Denny had to draw a line. No, I don't work for high schoolers. And I really needed his level of service. So 2 weeks before I started my undergrad, I was driving along and said, that's Denny's shop up there. And I just pulled in and walked in and introduced myself and said, I don't need anything right now, but I'm worried that maybe you hear my name and are frustrated. How can we work together? And he agreed to check things over for me before I left for school. But the first time I came back and he still had my horn in his lap, I didn't realize that I had even thought about the mechanism. I never thought about being a repair tech. I wanted the undergrad, the master's, the DMA, and a college teaching job. I wanted to be you, Allison.
Right.
And I see Steven's on here. I wanted Stephen Page's job.
Right.
But that trajectory was where I was at. But in the questions, Denny turned around and he looked over his shoulder because I was just completely overeager / borderline rude and intrusive. And he just said, quote, "I have two choices right now. I can either kick you out of my shop or hire you."
Wow.
And in all of that diatribe and questions, he saw potential. And that's the greatest opportunity that's ever been extended to me. So I worked the semester break, spring break, summer. One thing led to another. So as soon as I finished my undergrad, I went to work full time. And he and I worked together for 15 years. And then we had the very unexpected thing. Because of the nature of your committee, I'll kind of lean this way. I can't say for sure if it was a gender discrimination or if it was an age discrimination or if it was so simple that the master, the owner of the business, was still there. But people treated me horribly. And as a over 10 years of experience with the guidance of my mentor, I mean, I was literally a 3D printing version of him. It got to a point it was very insulting that people wouldn't let me even touch their case when they came in. They wouldn't speak to me on the phone. They just insisted on speaking to Denny. And it was very uncomfortable for me as well as for Denny. And when I had the chance then to go to New York City, he actually very much supported it, even though the goal was that he would train someone to do everything his way so that everything that left through the door was up to his standards and he could stand behind. And it was a huge investment on their part, he and his wife, in me. But we ultimately realized that when people know you as the apprentice, they are reluctant to accept you as the freestanding professional. Right. So New York City was very refreshing. It was terrifying. I'm thinking, even after 15 years of this training, how am I qualified to serve the needs of these clients? But thankfully it worked out, and that's what built my own independent business.
Wow. Yeah. So the training was it entirely apprenticeship based?
100%. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Because he explained to me, he was doing absolute top of the line professional work. Mm-hmm. And this is a woodwind shop, and I am a woodwind technician. The saxophonists may think I'm a saxophone specialist, but let me tell you, the oboists think I'm an oboe specialist. I deeply value, for many reasons, we can go into it or not, the cross training. And for me, it's the value of working on multiple instruments. There's benefits. We have specialists and we have woodwind people. In brass, you have the same thing too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know, like in Edmonton, I don't think there's a saxophone specialist. They're I think as narrow as they get is like wind instruments. So they'll do brass and woodwind. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a career path for all of that. But New York City was very simple. There's a place for everybody in New York City. And I could have had antennas and a tail. If I was doing the kind of work they needed, then I was accepted. So it was exactly the right thing for me at the right time.
Oh, yeah. And like currently, what options are there for kind of pursuing this work, this career path? I mean, apprenticeship and then what else? What else can a person do?
Sure. There's in the US, we have 3 schools that do programs in band instrument repair. All 3 of those schools do their programs that cover woodwinds and brass. And the most intensive of the 3 is a 2-year associate's degree, and that's Western Iowa Tech in Sioux City. But there's the Red Wing School in Red Wing, Minnesota. And then south of Seattle, Renton, Washington has a certification program. Those are about 14-month programs. But the truth of the programs is that they give you the basics so that you are able to go into a shop and earn your keep. But no one can learn this craft to an ability that would satisfy you or your students in 14 months.
Right.
It's a great starting point that an employer isn't losing money on you. You can do basic things and, like I say, earn your keep. But the goal is then to kind of be taken under the wing of a more advanced technician and have guidance and keep on growing.
Yeah. And I would imagine, like, there people who, what's typical if a person is pursuing the 2-year or 14-month certificate, are they also kind of highly trained musicians themselves, or what's going on?
I think the most common profile in those programs are people that have an undergrad degree in music. And they probably did their undergrad degree thinking they would either go on to grad school to pursue the college teaching progression, or maybe even music education, and then did some student teaching and realized this isn't quite right for me. I love music, but I'm looking for a more peripheral career option. There are people that come straight out of high school or from other industries too. It's a very diverse population in those student bodies.
Yeah, I bet so.
It's always fun to go teach there.
Yeah. And are you aware of what is on offer in Canada in terms of where a person could train?
I don't know. After Keanu College closed down their program, do you have anything up there now?
I'm not sure. I wonder if Sarah's on, if she's listening. I don't know. Perhaps maybe out east. Is anyone?
I've heard nothing.
Yeah.
I looked into it, and it's mainly
apprenticeships. Yeah. Which I know in Edmonton that does happen at the wind shop in town here. Okay, that's really interesting. And so, okay, so a typical path might be that you are pursuing a music studies after high school, and you feel like you want to gain this experience. So, but like I would imagine being a highly sensitive player is beneficial, so that
that's actually interesting you bring that up. Being a competent player of the instruments is very beneficial. It can swing in a way that's very unpredictable. Someone who is of high mastery of the instrument that they fix, that's not necessarily a benefit. When I have a professional client here, my own play testing results don't matter. The only thing that matters is that I get that client and that horn to where they need to be. And what I think of it and my results are rather irrelevant. So I think what's important is that you not let your own mastery of any instrument be a stumbling block for you. You can't be biased. And the worst thing a technician can do is actually make decisions for someone else's horn based on their bias that doesn't line up with the client. And I've seen that happen frequently. So I look at the play testing as I need to be able to play the instrument well enough to determine if I have gotten the instrument to the point that now I'm ready for its owner to step in. What did this job entail, and did we achieve it so that I'm ready for the client to then come in? We always have to remember it's not our horn. This is service. We work for you guys.
Yeah, right. And so do you play all the woodwind instruments then to some degree or another? Okay. Yeah, okay.
Basically, my other woodwind, I studied flute as my secondary. But my other woodwind playing skills are about on par with a 7th grader. So there are some very humorous play tests in here.
Right. That's really interesting. That's okay. That's cool. So have you been approached by prospective apprentices, and what advice would you give to people interested in apprenticeship? Like, that initial ask even, or whatever, like what?
Sure. Now I have had 8 or 9 apprentices work with me. And for me, in what I do here, and like I said, I'm kind of a carbon copy of Denny. My business is very similar. I basically start with undergraduates and then up through working professionals. If a client advocates on behalf of a high schooler who is a college-bound music major, I will work for them. And that's joy to show them what is possible in the repair shop and that they have a voice and options. But anyway, in this level of a shop, to train someone to be able to do a lot of what I do would be a minimum of a 10-year for them to be in here with me.
Yeah.
So no one has done that with me, but there's also another level of documenting an overhaul. You see, I can't just rip apart your horns and overhaul them. I have to keep track of what you're used to so that you get your own horn back. But my apprentices have been trained to document the instruments, take them apart, notate if they encounter any problems. They don't need to know how to fix those problems, but let me know if they found a bent key or something, and they can do the teardowns and the cleanups. So I've had apprentices in that capacity that they're very helpful, but not necessarily training to be the technician. Because, like I say, for professional work, my opinion is that it's a minimum of the 10-year oversight process.
So it sounds like a good first impression would be at bare minimum recognizing, like, with a sense of humility, the long road that you are about to go down.
That's the perfect word. There's no room for ego in this business because on a routine basis, something crosses my bench that honestly kicks my butt and I learned something from. So you don't even have room to start thinking that you're awesome because something comes along that just, terrorizes you. And you feel like, am I really equipped to handle this? Yes, but you have to stop and figure it out. But back to your initial question, I would be looking for someone who clearly demonstrates that working on instruments is for the benefit of someone else. You have to really see that they can respect that they are working for someone else and on behalf of each client's interests. A general mechanical ability. It's humorous and painful to watch an apprentice do something the first time. They're going to mess it up. They're going to mess it up. And I'm really looking for the second time around. How quickly do they learn? But some mechanical ability. And honestly, if you're going to sit in my shop and be this close with me, just are you a type of human that's pleasant to be around? And the most important quality, though, is someone who clearly knows that when they are told to stop, you have to stop before you get into trouble and enlarge a problem or potentially damage an instrument.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a weird set of credentials, isn't it?
Yeah, but it does seem rather broad, like in terms of you don't need to come in already with X, Y, and Z specific knowledge about the instrument, but like a mindset, and maybe attention to detail. Yeah, it's encouraging. That's cool.
But there would be similarities to you as you're looking at prospective students coming into the studio. You're looking for someone who wants to be taught and is eager for that rather than the wanting to demonstrate constantly, look what I've already achieved. Someone has to be teachable.
Right. Oh yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, that's cool. Are there any questions from anyone online or in person at this point?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know some people when they travel, they're like, oh, there's this repair person who is really reputable in this country, and I would take my horn there. Or like, how do you feel about people seeing multiple technicians cheating on them? We talk about personalization, but then sometimes, like, to what extent is seeing too many people too much? Or like, what's your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, I love the fact that you have the awareness that by doing that, you could be creating a difficult situation. So there's not one right answer, but if you have established an ongoing working relationship with your tech and you are going somewhere that there's a technician who has a skill or does a technique that your technician doesn't do, I would hope that your regular technician would hear that from you. And if it is something that they don't do, that they would be open and receptive to it. You're correct. There are people that can really be offended by that. But for me personally, I know what I do. I know what I do well, and I know what I don't do well. And there are certain things, again, I'm sorry to keep throwing clarinet examples at you, but if a clarinet actually breaks and that where they join, that's called the tenon, just like the end of your neck is the tenon that drops into the body. When those snap, that rebuilding of the body is not something I do. So I'm not going to take the time to learn that because it only comes up about once every 3 years. But I respect the experts who do the things that I don't, and they don't do the things that they would consider me an expert on. So there is a possibility of having a very cooperative relationship amongst specialists. But I would just say always be open and honest with the person who is doing your regular business and look at it as a complete picture. Does that answer your inquiry somewhat? Okay.
Wonderful. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one.
Sure.
Like talking about like apprenticeship and like how long the road can be, and if someone's interested in it and like but like let's say they are in their degree or they're going on to more degrees or like all that stuff, is it worth trying to like get little mini like lessons and like a like week here and there, or is it something that you kind of have to devote your whole focus to?
I think anything is possible. I have had people come in here that have very targeted things where they say, I know I'm going to end up teaching in a very remote area. As Allison and I communicated about from the beginning, I can't teach anybody anything meaningful in terms of an actual repair technique in an hour. So I've had people come back and say, can I pay you for a few hours and teach me how to replace neck corks? Teach me how to put a tenon cork on or change a pad in a common place that they fall out, palm keys or low E flat. So you can do targeted things that benefit certain skills. It's about what are you trying, what is your goal, and what is the time investment that's appropriate for that. And different techs will handle that differently and have a conversation. And if they're not willing to have a conversation with you, it's not worth your time to ask. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Is that a high five from Stephen Page?
Yeah, either a high five or a question.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I've got a question. Hi, Shelly. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for coming today.
Of course, wouldn't miss it. I'd love to hear you maybe chat a little bit about what we can do as clients or potential clients to ensure that we, build a great relationship with our tech or come prepared when we're bringing our horn in, to make sure that we, get the most out of a visit, things like that, that would be useful to all of us as we, visit our friends doing your kind of work, because it's important to us too, of course, that our instruments work, and there's a lot to communicating that.
Yes. Well, you said the magic word, and I'm sorry if I just cut you off. I apologize.
You're good.
Okay. The magic word is communication. And coming into an appointment, when we say, are you prepared for your appointment? You can bring me a list. I have one client that keeps an active shared note on iPhone. And every time he updates it, yes, I get an alert and no, it's not a problem. Information for me is not intrusive or overstepping, to the point that one of my New York clients, on a historical restoration of a King Super 20, he won the auction of Cannonball's saxophone that he appeared in the ads with. The restoration was accompanied by 3 pages of single-spaced notes of what he wanted. And he immediately called after I received it and said, did I offend you by that? Not at all. You just gave me the recipe for making you happy. Flip side of that, you have to be able to, the client needs to be able to respect when we come back and say, I'm really happy to know what you want, but it's not possible for this reason. the relationship is the true definition of a collaboration. And we don't always each get what we want, but a great client, it starts with the clear communication and it starts with respect. I have kicked clients out of the clientele. In my 33 years of work, I think my list is 12 to 14 people. And it's kind of like a breakup. I'm saying things like it's time for us to see other people, things like that. But the reason that I could no longer work with these people all came down to the expectations were not really attainable. I can't, in saxophone language, assure you that a cannonball will ever play like a Yamaha. So the expectations just need to be very reasonable, clear communication in both directions, and very respectful of time. The worst thing you can do to a tech is not do your maintenance and then push your way in for an emergency. And then I'm not just dealing with the emergency item, I am dealing with 10 years of deferred maintenance. That's a real fast way to burn a bridge with a shop. So, Stephen, I hope that answers your question. And please nudge if you can think of anything else that would be useful as we talk about this.
Oh, no, it's great. For the record, I am not the person with the shared Apple Note with Shelly. But maybe I will be now. I did just book an appointment yesterday. So, but what about you operate a very specific type of shop there in Waco, Texas. Do you take walk-ins? Do you have, is that a thing for you, or do you take mail order? Like, how does your business work based on what you did?
So this business here is 50-50. Half of the business is shipped in from around the country, and half of it are people within a driving distance, about a 5 to 6 hour radius will drive in. You want to ask, just flat out, ask your technician, how do I work with you? There are technicians that don't want voicemail. They will never answer an email. Every one of us does this job differently. For me, everything is by appointment. This shop that I'm sitting in is a building behind my house. So I operate in a residential neighborhood. I can't have signage and I can't have people causing traffic. So everything is by appointment. I would work that way anyway. So every shop is going to work very differently. I do zero social media. I never finished a website. I'm just very fortunate that I'm so crazy busy. My fear is to create traffic that I either can't handle or makes me less available to my existing clientele. But different shops are going to do things differently, and it's advisable to just ask, how do you prefer that I work with you? You'll get a different answer from each technician.
That's really interesting. I think I want to, on that note about communicating the needs, and then I think we should perhaps wrap it up in a couple minutes. Our local shop here, oftentimes when we bring in an instrument, it's a front desk person who takes it, and then it's a game of telephone, I kind of imagine, into conveying the problems to the repair tech. How, in this kind of situation, in that kind of business setup, how would a person best get their points across if it's not the repair tech themselves receiving the instrument?
Sure. If you don't know who exactly will ultimately be opening your case and endeavoring to complete your repair, if you don't really know how that person communicates, I would suggest that you take your primary, like top three concerns and bullet point them and use the words please and thank you. But I find that, communication, our whole world has changed, especially after COVID. But the way we communicate, I don't bank on many people having a very long attention span. I use too many words for most people. But just if you get 30 seconds of them thinking about what you want, rather than them just saying, well, I'll see what it needs, put your top immediate concerns and just leave it in a note in the case, or see how their desk person handles that. And even ask, would it be possible to speak with or somehow communicate with the technician before we wrap this up?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's wonderful. I don't think I have done that yet of like leaving sometimes I can get the repair tech directly face to face, but a written note like right on top of the instrument. That seems great.
Yeah. But again, see, we're weird. I'm always told I'm shockingly normal within this craft. Repair techs are weird. We joke about like Star Trek conventions and stuff. Imagine what a repair technician conference is like. I'm very happy to say that now I actually find that there are lines in the ladies' room. It used to be at a technician's conference. It was great because I had bathrooms to myself. So I'm thrilled to see that there's more women in the industry. But we tend to be just really odd people that do this business. So the awareness of I have no idea who this person is, what they like, what annoys them. That's why I just advise, just ask, how do I work with you?
Yeah, that's cool.
And they'll usually tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great open question. Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. Well, Shelly, I'm so appreciative of you giving your expertise and your time.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone who took the time to attend. I appreciate it, and who will take the time to look at it later.
Yes, likewise. Thank you everyone for attending, and have a lovely afternoon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.